I'm going to be going on vacation for about a week with John, and I only have a few minutes before another appointment, and I just want to talk about something for a second. I really hope that somehow, some way, this starts to get through to people. You know, I've been talking about socialist realism or Socrealism a lot for about 3 years now, and it's not stopping. I'm going to remind that the core principle of Socrealism is the following. The hero of the story, the hero, is toil, and the toiler is unthinkable outside the collective. Now keep that in mind as I'm explaining it. Again, the hero is toil and the toiler is unthinkable outside the collective. I remember in 2000, I graduated from Tisch School of the Arts at NYU. I didn't attend the big NYU graduation. For Tisch students, there was a smaller one, and it was held at Carnegie Hall. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of this, but I had already been on the stage at Carnegie Hall before. And so I was, kind of poo-pooing what a big deal this was. I was also your typical, 90s kind of artsy, I guess you could say rebel. And any of these things that, were part of a group really, I had that real, conformity is the worst thing you could do kind of streak, which a lot of us had, and I miss, frankly. And we're, putting on our caps and gowns in the wings of Carnegie Hall. And I remember walking out onto that stage, looking out, feeling that wood beneath my feet and hearing that remarkable it humbled us, all of us. And suddenly there was this pride, real pride, not false pride, but proud of ourselves for what we had done, what we had gotten to, where we were. And in my particular case, it was pretty profound because I'd been through a pretty horrific few years. But I'd managed to still be class of 2000. And it stuck with me. And it really was helpful the following year when those towers came down. And I had friends who died. Ritual and rites of passage are essential to human beings. We are ritual makers. We will make them when we don't have them. What do I mean? Well, masking. I've made some satirical and parody remarks about, the Covidian cult and masking and that it's really donning a ritual, garment. But what do all these new rituals have in common? They all elevate the state and elevate party with a capital P, and purpose with a capital P, above everything. I'm going to say something that's pretty controversial, and I hope people listen to the substance of what I'm saying. As I say this, know that in no way am I diminishing the horrors of what happens when a group of people are identified and slaughtered. Specifically what we call the Shoah, the Holocaust, or genocide. But what we keep doing is talking about these things and ignoring something called democide and something else called menticide. So genocide is the destruction of a people for their immutable characteristics. Democide is the murder of people by the state. Menticide is essentially the murder of their minds, or the rape of their minds. One of the features of liberation theology is its use of identity and identitarianism. And it uses this in order to divide and conquer. convince people that the hero is toil and that the toiler is unthinkable outside the collective. I don't live in New York City anymore. It's hard for me to say that, especially since I still have an apartment there, but I'm reaching an understanding that I won't be going back. There's this video of James Lindsay with Michael Fallon from before COVID. They're sitting on a roof and they're talking about New York. And there's this moment where James says that he's jealous of us. And why? I'll tell you why. In 2003, we had that blackout. Now, this was, 2 years after 9/11, around the same time of year. The weather was similar, and all the lights went out. I remember I was on the phone with my ex, and the call dropped, and I was filled with a terror. But a terror that we were kind of used to by this point. There was this understanding that, at any point, something else could happen, and we'd sort of come to this bizarre but stoic acceptance of this. And the world seemed to understand. Now, sure, there were some people that were making everything political, but for those of us in New York at the time, there was nothing political about any of this. When your senses allow you to smell, taste, hear horror, it changes you. And that's the only truth that matters. We were there. 20 years later, it felt as if New York was punished for not giving whoever and whatever was taking advantage of such horrors what they wanted at the time. And by that I mean destruction of that thing that James had been talking about, that he was jealous of. He described it as New York being a meta community. And we were. Here's an example. In 2003, when the lights went out, as the sun was setting, you could go to every single corner of every street in New York, and there was a person guiding traffic, not being ordered to, not being told to by anybody. Those altruistic and utopian anarcho-capitalists out there would say that this is an example of humanity. What we do when we're at our best, when we're allowed to be. And they would be right. But that's not the only feature of being human. Like I said, when rituals are removed, we are ritual makers. We will create, concoct, and make another. We've been blindly allowing politics to infiltrate every single element of our lives. Anyone who's actually seen totalitarianism knows that the moment you believe that politics is everything is the moment it's done. It's over. The lack of real understanding, and I don't say empathy or sympathy as if somehow we have to treat these young people like they're victims, but we're dehumanizing them. We are dehumanizing students, knowing full well that in New York City, the majority of those people who behaved so egregiously were not students in those universities. Exactly the same thing, in the exact same reality as what happened in 2020 on the streets of New York during BLM. Some of us tried to tell you that. New York, and I dare say LA and all these other cities, are being used as basically a stage in this liberation theology play that we're all witnessing, and being told that we are essentially passive observers to this revolutionary LARP. But the moment we celebrate that students who 4 years ago were denied a rite of passage because we allowed them to be told that they were trivial and that they were unthinkable outside of a collective, now being told and taught this lesson again, and we think somehow this is a win. No, it's not. We're going to pay a price for it. And we're going to keep paying a price for it the longer we pretend these are not kids. They're kids. They're remarkably immature. Not just because there's something wrong with them, but because there's something wrong with us. These are kids that have been taught that their bodies, their minds, their integrity, their sense of self, their individuality, all of it is trivial, for sale, able to be squandered, bartered, and that the only thing that matters is politics. And this completely all-consuming misunderstanding of what the word history actually means. And we are allowing it because we keep paying so much attention to this fucking culture war that we are willing to destroy all elements of our culture in order to quote-unquote win it. Now, I'm sorry, but politics and culture are not down or upstream from one another. That is a myth. That is a lie. With much respect to Breitbart, let's remember what he was doing for a living. We can't, canonize people once they're gone. I guarantee you that he probably would have changed his tune, just like Jefferson changed his tune about the necessity of revolution after seeing the French Revolution. The reality is that culture is the stream. It is the stream. Politics are embankments. And when you teach young people that they are at mercy of politics, bureaucrats, institutions that clearly don't give a shit about them, and focus so much on that and not focus on the fact that why were and who allowed these, who could be, they're domestic terrorists, to infiltrate their universities, infiltrate their minds, and tell them and allow them to do exactly what happened in 2020. Where is the media coverage of that? Where is the accountability on places like, and people like RevCom, Thousand Currents, Sue Rosenberg, Bob Avakian? Who's ignoring the fact that the president of Colombia is an outspoken socialist? We're so addicted to this freaking culture war and looking for wins that we're not looking at the actual causes. We pretend that somehow if politics change, if things are banned or censored or what have you, that somehow things will change. They won't. The betrayal. Look, all that coverage of what was going on there, nobody gave a crap about how it happened. How many of us have been pleading with people to start looking at certain institutions and names and ways of disseminating this propaganda, and nothing is done. Nothing. And we're celebrating now that another rite of passage has been denied these students. What they're being denied is a moment of realizing that they matter. That's what really good rites of passage do. It simultaneously lifts up an individual knowing that they're protected and supported underneath, and amplifies their individual talents. That's what's been denied them. And you're going to say, fuck around and find out? Well, I say the same to you. Fuck around and find out. We are the ones who are responsible. And if we keep fearing another genocide more than menticide and democide, which is what we've been doing for the last 4 freaking years, then we are the ones to blame for that. We're teaching young people that their minds are of no value. We're teaching them that a couple of bad actors can destroy all their efforts again. Because we're having some sick Schadenfreude or Freude, whatever the hell that German word is for, dark glee at somebody else's suffering. And frankly, all of America is doing that to places like New York and LA. And if you think for a second that if this keeps going on, you're not going to pay a price because you're simply going to deny hiring these people, you're so naive. My mother and her uncle, her brother, my uncle, when they escaped Hitler, and after that, Stalin got them just before they were going to board to what became Israel. the night before they took him. They joined a circus, literally, and went from town to town and abused their own bodies and broke legs and arms and you name it, just so they could be educated. Just so they could continue their education, because they were going to be denied it because they were, kids of the bourgeois. What's amazing to me now, it's something I will never understand, is somehow this whole check your privilege bullshit has spread so much into our society that we are allowing ourselves to say it now to the victims of these ideologues on all sides. But most of all, these victims of basically politics. We are allowing our 4 years later, again, we are allowing a political ritual to supersede and overwhelm and override natural rites of passage that we've established over however long, and we don't even see the value in it. Is it a coincidence that the young people who are leading this 4 years ago were denied their own high school graduations? And then they don't understand what's going on, so what'll they do? They'll blame and point to, gun control or any other thing, because in their young minds, they don't understand why is it that they keep being trivialized. The story they are being told over and over and over again is a Socrealist narrative, that the hero is toil and the toiler is unthinkable outside the collective. And it's being retold. So some of them are flocking to Islam. Others are flocking to a bastardized version of Christianity. And others are flocking to a bastardized version of Judaism. Why? Because that's the point. The goal is to eliminate everything other than itself. That's what liberation theology does. There can be only one. And that one can only be a death cult that is so dark that it incorporates a promise of eternal life. Think about that. The best some people can hope for is to be numb enough to only fear death and not fear living, or vice versa. In Rape of the Mind by Merleau, that is precisely what he defines as menticide. That a people become so much more afraid of living than they do of death. And meanwhile, here we are reducing humanity to stats and scores and numbers again. Like 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we were looking at the numbers of COVID deaths, or supposed COVID deaths. Now we're looking at the supposed numbers of Palestinian deaths. We have turned everything moral into some warped census. We're counting people rather than telling them that they count. And you honestly think that this is going to go well? I hope to God that somebody out there recognizes what these young people have lost and bothers to say something to them about it and bothers to help them know that they can find a way. That they can find a way to mark what they've accomplished despite the abuse at the hands of our society. Now you might say that I sound like I'm being woke because I'm defining something as systemic. No, it's not systemic. It's anti-human and it's not who we are, and we have to stop. Just stop. But we won't. Because just like them, we're addicted to the political witch hunt ritual. So addicted to it, in fact, that we somehow enjoy seeing these criminals get away with it over and over and over again because we enjoy watching it. We think we're watching the destruction of our enemy. We're not. They're just transforming